My name is Elias Vance. For as long as I can remember, my life has been shaped by the grain of wood. I grew up in the misty shadow of the Cascade Mountains, in a small Oregon town called Cedar Creek, where the air smells perpetually of damp earth and pine. My father was a carpenter, not an artist, but a man who understood the soul of a tree. He taught me to listen to the wood, to feel its history in the whorls and knots. After he passed, I took that inheritance of intuition and built Vance and Company. Fine woodworking. I started in his old garage with a set of inherited chisels and a dream. Today, we have a 10,000 square foot workshop on the edge of town and a small, dedicated team of artisans. We don't mass produce. We create pieces that are meant to be passed down through generations. It's a quiet life, a good life, built on integrity and the beauty of the natural world. The foundation of that life, I thought, was my marriage to Isabel. But the first crack appeared not in a piece of flawed maple, but on the screen of my tablet at 2 in the morning. It's a strange thing, what sleeplessness reveals. I was lying in bed, the familiar weight of anxiety pressing on my chest. It had been there for months, a low hum of dissonance in our home. Isabel was beside me, her breathing even and deep, a picture of tranquility. But when I was awake and the world was asleep, the silence felt charged with everything unsaid between us. I picked up my tablet, intending to review some new designs, but on a whim, I opened the app for the workshop's security cameras. I'd installed the simple cloud-based system a year ago after some valuable burl wood was stolen from our drying shed. It was practical, a way to keep an eye on our inventory. For small cameras covered the main workshop, the finishing room, the lumberyard, and the hallway leading to our small office. That hallway mirror, an antique Rococo piece I'd restored, was a gift for Isabel. It hung directly opposite the office door, and the camera caught its reflection perfectly. And in that reflection, I saw my wife. She was standing in her silk pajamas, her back to the camera, facing her own image. I watched, confused, as she composed her face. Her brow furrowed, her lips trembled, and her shoulders began to shake. She brought a hand to her mouth, stifling a sob that I knew, even through the silent video feed, was utterly soundless. A tear traced a path down her cheek. She held the pose for a long moment, studying her reflection with the critical eye of a painter examining a canvas. Then, as if a director had called cut, her expression cleared. She wiped the tear away, took a deep breath, and tried again, this time tilting her head slightly, making the look of anguish seem more vulnerable, more tragic. She was practicing, rehearsing sorrow. My heart didn't race. It seemed to slow, each beat a heavy, cold stone dropping into a deep well inside me. This wasn't a woman overwhelmed by private grief. This was an artist preparing for a performance, and I was beginning to suspect I was her unwitting audience. Isabel and I had been married for 6 years. We met at a gallery in Portland where some of my work was on display. She was an art history graduate, full of vibrant theories and a passion for aesthetics that I found captivating. She said she saw the story in my work, the conversation between the human hand and the spirit of the tree. I was smitten. She had dreams of curating her own gallery one day, and I poured my support into that vision. We'd scouted locations, drafted business plans, and I'd earmarked $50,000 from my business savings to help her get started. But the gallery never materialized. The plans grew dusty. Her enthusiasm waned, replaced by a restlessness I couldn't soothe. She stopped talking about artists and movements and started talking about asset allocation and limited liability corporations. She'd listen to financial podcasts while she gardened, her earbuds a barrier between us. When I'd ask, she'd smile and say she was learning how to be a better partner in our future, ensuring we were diversified and protected. At the time, I thought it was a sign of maturity, of her finding a new, more practical passion. It felt like we were building something solid together, a life as sturdy and beautiful as a well-made dovetail joint. My business had given us that foundation. What started as a one-man shop now employed 7 people. We had a 3-year wait list for custom dining sets and had recently secured a commission to furnish a new boutique hotel in the wine country. Last year, our net revenue was just over $300,000, most of which I reinvested into better equipment and higher quality, sustainably sourced lumber. I lived simply. The joy for me was in the work, not the wealth. Success, I've learned, changes the landscape of a relationship. The ground shifts so subtly you don't notice until you lose your footing. About 6 months ago, Isabel's questions became more pointed. Elias, why isn't my name on the business deeds? She'd ask while we were making dinner. Shouldn't we have a joint business account for transparency? I explained, patiently at first, that the business was a sole proprietorship, structured that way on the advice of my accountant long before I'd met her. It was simpler, cleaner, and protected our personal assets from business liability. It protects us, I'd emphasized. My accountant, a wise old man named Samuel, had always preached the gospel of clean lines between personal and professional finances. Changing the structure would be a complex and expensive legal process. That answer was no longer enough. Her curiosity felt less like partnership and more like an audit. She wanted to see everything: profit and loss statements, equipment depreciation schedules, client contracts. I just want to understand the whole picture, darling, she'd say, her tone soft and reasonable. It's our life, after all. I am a man who believes in trust. It is the invisible joinery that holds a life together. So I showed her. I walked her through the books, explained my projections, my hopes, my fears for the company. I thought I was fostering intimacy. Now I suspect I was simply providing ammunition. Her strange behaviors began to stack up like ill-cut planks, creating a structure that was visibly out of true. Her phone, once left casually on the counter, was now always screened down or in her purse. She'd take long, hushed calls in the garden, pacing the stone paths. During disagreements, which were becoming more frequent, she'd position herself in the living room, always in view of the large bay window, her body language seeming performative, as if playing to an unseen camera. And always, that new, expensive leather satchel was by her side. We had argued about that bag. It cost $2,000, a sum she'd spent without a word to me, from our joint savings account, at a time when I was carefully managing cash flow to purchase a rare slab of ancient redwood. In my workshop, when a piece of wood resists, when the grain doesn't behave as expected, you don't force it. You stop. You study it. You try to understand its nature. I needed to understand what was happening in my own home. So, after that night of watching her practice crying, I began to watch the recordings. I felt a deep shame doing it, a sense of violating the very trust one held so dear. But the image of her manufactured tears was a splinter in my mind, and I had to get it out. The system's cloud storage held a rolling 30 days of footage. I started with the day she bought the expensive bag. I found the argument we'd had that evening. The full recording was nearly 30 minutes long. It began with me, tired after a long day wrestling with a warped piece of walnut, gently asking her about the withdrawal from our savings. I explained my concern, reminding her about the redwood slab I hoped to be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the business. Elias, it's just a bag, she'd said, her voice tight with defensiveness. Am I not allowed to have something beautiful? Do I have to ask your permission like a child? Of course not, Isabel, I'd said, my voice calm, though my stomach was churning. It's not about permission. It's about communication. We're a team. That savings account is for big things, for emergencies, for your gallery. The conversation devolved from there, her accusations of my being controlling growing louder, my frustration rising in response. By the end, yes, my voice was raised. I'd said, this feels incredibly selfish, Isabel. It's like you don't even see what I'm trying to build for us. Then I looked at the files on her laptop, which she'd left open on her desk. She had a folder labeled Personal Records. Inside, I found video files. The clips were neatly dated. I clicked on the one from the day of our argument. It was 90 seconds long. It started with my raised voice, my face flushed with frustration. It captured only my angry accusation and her subsequent, tearful response that I was crushing her spirit. The entire preceding 28 minutes of calm, rational discussion had been neatly excised. My blood ran cold, but it wasn't the cold of fear. It was the cold of absolute, heartbreaking clarity. She wasn't just saving arguments. She was curating them. She was building a narrative, a story of her oppression, and I was being cast as the villain. I spent the next 2 nights methodically going through the archive, cross-referencing her edited clips with the original footage. The pattern was the same every time. She would provoke, I would react, and she would save only the reaction. She was a sculptor, chipping away at the truth until only the ugly caricature she wanted remained. The final, devastating piece of evidence came from a recording made 2 months prior. I was supposed to be in Seattle for a craft fair, but it had been canceled at the last minute due to a storm. I'd come home early, and she wasn't there. The camera in the hallway, however, had recorded her afternoon. She'd had her friend Chloe over for tea. They sat in the living room, their conversation captured clearly by the office camera's microphone. "The key," Isabel said, her voice crisp and clinical, "is to establish a pattern of emotional volatility. My lawyer says the court needs to see that he's unpredictable and controlling." Chloe sounded hesitant. "Are you sure about this, Is? He seems so gentle." "Gentle people can be the most suffocating," Isabel had replied, a dismissive wave of her hand. "He smothers me with his vision, his craft. It's all about his business, his legacy. Where do I fit in? I'm just a supporting character." "Well, the supporting character is about to get half the production company." She had laughed then, a sound devoid of any humor. "I just need a few more good clips. Something that sounds like a threat would be perfect. Judges are very sensitive to that." The conversation went on for nearly an hour. She detailed her entire strategy, from the initial separation to the final settlement. She had already consulted a lawyer, had a financial analyst value my business evaluation that was insultingly low, and had planned out her life post-divorce. She spoke of moving back to Portland, finally opening her gallery with what she called her half of the investment. My life's work. I sat there in the dark, the glow of the screen illuminating the ruins of my marriage. The woman I loved did not exist. I had been in a relationship with a ghost, a character she had been playing. The grief was immense, a physical weight that made it hard to breathe. But beneath the grief, a harder, denser feeling was beginning to form. The resolve to protect the work and the life I had so painstakingly built. The next morning, I drove out to see Mr. Abe. He was my father's friend and my first mentor, a master woodworker who had retired years ago. He lived in a small cabin in the woods, surrounded by Japanese maples. We sat on his porch, drinking green tea. I told him everything, my voice quiet, my hands shaking slightly as I held the warm cup. He listened, his ancient face impassive, his eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, he was silent for a long time, watching a hummingbird dart among his fuchsias. "Elias," he said finally, his voice like the rustle of dry leaves. "A tree that is not sound at its core cannot stand in a storm. It will be hollowed out by insects and rot. You have discovered the rot." He looked at my hands. "You build strong things. Things with integrity. Now, you must be as strong as the things you build." He gave me the name of a lawyer in Portland. "Eleanor Reed," he said. "She is not a sledgehammer. She is a fine chisel. She finds the weakness in the grain and splits it cleanly." Meeting Eleanor was like finding a piece of perfectly straight-grained oak. She was in her 50s, with a calm, focused energy that immediately put me at ease. Her office was filled not with intimidating law books, but with plants and beautiful, abstract art. I told her the story, and I showed her the folder of video files, the originals and Isabel's edited versions. She watched the video of Isabel and Chloe without a flicker of expression, but when it was over, she looked at me with a deep, compassionate intelligence. "This is a profound betrayal, Elias," she said softly. "Our job is to respond not with anger, but with clarity. The truth is your strongest tool. We will use it." 3 weeks later, the storm broke. I came home to find a pristine white envelope on the kitchen island, resting on the smooth, polished cherry wood I had built myself. The divorce petition was a work of fiction, casting me as a possessive, emotionally abusive tyrant who used financial control to sabotage my wife's ambitions. It claimed I had installed cameras to monitor and intimidate her. It asked for half the business, the house, and spousal support that would effectively cripple Vance and Company. Isabel, the petition said, was now living with her sister. A week later, our joint accounts were frozen by a court order. The narrative she had so carefully constructed was now a legal document. Word travels fast in a town like Cedar Creek. Rumors began to swirl like sawdust in a whirlwind. Clients called, their voices laced with concern, asking if their projects were still on schedule. A local journalist from the Cedar Creek Chronicle called to ask for a comment on the abuse allegations mentioned in the court filing. My team at the workshop was loyal, but I could see the worry in their eyes. The business, built on a reputation of trust and painstaking care, was being threatened by lies. The Hotel Commission, our biggest project to date, was put on hold, the investors citing concerns about the stability of the company's leadership. Isabel's lawyer, a notoriously aggressive man named Marcus Thorne, pushed for a binding mediation session, hoping to force a quick settlement before a full trial. He was confident, believing he held an unassailable hand. The mediation took place in a sterile conference room in Portland. Isabel sat across the long table, dressed in a simple gray dress, her face pale and her eyes downcast. She looked fragile, broken. It was a masterful performance. Thorne laid out their case with theatrical bluster, his voice booming in the quiet room. "My client has endured years of psychological torment," he declared, before playing one of Isabel's edited clips, the one of me yelling about the purse. "This is a man who uses his financial power as a weapon to terrorize his wife." He played 2 more clips, each one a perfectly framed portrait of me as a monster. With each one, Isabel flinched as if struck. When he was finished, a heavy silence filled the room. The mediator, a retired judge, looked at me with a stern, disappointed expression. Then Eleanor spoke, her voice calm and measured. "We agree that the video evidence is crucial to this case," she said, opening her laptop, "which is why we feel it's important for everyone to see the complete recordings." One by one, she played the full videos. The argument about the purse, now framed by the 28 minutes of my patient attempts at discussion. The argument where I'd slammed a door, now shown to be preceded by my discovery that she'd accidentally donated a box of my late father's tools to Goodwill. Context flowed back into the room, and with it, the truth. Thorne objected, sputtering about relevance, but the mediator waved him into silence, her eyes fixed on the screen. Isabel's composure began to fray at the edges. A flush crept up her neck. And finally, Eleanor said, her gaze now fixed on Isabel, "There is the matter of premeditation." She played the recording of Isabel's conversation with Chloe. "The key is to establish a pattern. My lawyer says the court needs to see that he's unpredictable and controlling. The supporting character is about to get half the production company." The color drained from Isabel's face. Thorne's jaw went slack. The mediator took off her glasses and rubbed her eyes, a look of profound weariness on her face. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by a small, choked sound from Isabel. She knew, and everyone in that room knew, that the play was over. The mediator dismissed the petition for spousal support and the claim against my business on the spot. She looked at Isabel, not with anger, but with a kind of pity. "Ma'am," she said, "this is a tragedy, but it is one of your own making." She then informed Isabel's lawyer that she would be recommending the district attorney review the case for perjury and attempted fraud. I didn't feel victorious. As I walked out of that building into the cool Oregon rain, I only felt a vast, aching emptiness. The woman I had loved and built a life with was a stranger, a ghost who had haunted my house and my heart. The betrayal was a deep, clean cut, and I knew the scar would remain. In the months that followed, Isabel accepted a plea bargain to avoid a trial, leaving her with a criminal record and a mountain of legal debt. The Hotel Commission was reinstated. Our clients, old and new, rallied around us. It turned out that a reputation built on years of integrity was stronger than a few weeks of lies. The hardest part wasn't the legal battle or the financial strain. It was accepting the truth. It was grieving a marriage that had never really existed. It was learning that sometimes the most beautiful facade can hide the deepest rot. I find my healing where I've always found it, in the workshop. Today, I'm running my hands over a new piece, a tabletop made from that slab of ancient redwood I was finally able to purchase. The wood is magnificent, thousands of years old, its surface a map of droughts, fires, and floods. It has survived everything. As I sand the surface, feeling the warmth and life still present in the grain, I think about the lessons the wood teaches. That strength is not about being unyielding, but about having a core of integrity that can withstand the storm. That true beauty is never just on the surface, it runs all the way through. And that even after the deepest cuts, with patience and care, it is possible to be restored, to be made whole again.